Now, this time, you will continue recording and not randomly cut out partway through. Do you see, OBS? You will obey me. I need a watch. I can wave at it. Hello, my loyal subjects, and welcome! Needless to say, I've had a few failed takes, and some due to technical difficulties, which caused much rage. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about, the bevel tool. It's one of my favorite little environment modeling tools, and you might be asking, hey, that's cool, but what the fuck's with the background? Are you just showing off again? Are you just pretentious? Well, the answer is yes, but, in this case, these are the failed takes from the tutorials. So this is what we're going to be making today. We're going to be making parts similar to this. I made the railing, and then I made the pillory thing. Anyway, so the bevel tool. I just blanked for a second there. The bevel tool is a really, really powerful environment modeling tool, not just for adding bevels, but for a variety of other things very similar or near to making bevels, or in other words, just adjusting the shape of your assets. On top of being really, really good for stuff like woodworking, it can also be incredibly useful for stuff like metalwork and ornate small details, because it can also be used in profile-based modeling, which I'm going to do a brief run over in a little bit, but for now, let's just go in and talk about the very, very basics of building a or just using the bevel tool. Very basics of using the bevel tool. So let's just go in here. I'm going to grab this, move this to another layer, because it doesn't need to be cluttering up its own layer. So let's just start off, we'll throw down a cube, and let's just go in. So if we go into edit mode, we hit Control B, we can start beveling. Ignore that default settings. I'm just going to reset all of this to default settings real quick. So let's see. Yep, that's it. So anyway, this is our bevel tool. It's a lovely little beveling tool. Most of you will be familiar with how it works. So you hit Control B, you bevel. You can also scroll your scroll wheel to add and remove segments. As you can see, I can adjust how many segments are in the bevel. And then if we just go down the list a little bit, we've got amount, segments. We have an amount, we have the offset type, which will give us some different modes for how it calculates its offsets. And we can also adjust the profile. Now, this is one of the most overlooked settings in Bevel. It is one of the most overlooked and one of the most powerful settings in Bevel, especially if you're making environments. So if we drag this down, you can see we get this groove around the edges, and we'll be using this in a little bit to create some really gorgeous woodworking. It's really amazing for stuff like wood trim. We can also use it, if we drag it up, to create these very harsh edges. So you can see this will minimally modify our mesh's shape, but still add edge loops around the edges. This can be really useful when you're doing subdivision surface, because it can add a lot of support. And if you're unfamiliar with what I mean, if we add a subdivision surface modifier, we can bevel it with this kind of a harsh edge, and you can see it adds edge support, allows us to harden up the edges, adding some supporting edge loops. You can also do this manually by Control R and adding edge loops, because it'll sort of pull all the vertices towards that point, but this is kind of tedious, so I recommend using the bevel tool in all of its amazingness. So just select the edges you want. Remember that bevel tool works on edges, so select the edges you want, do that. I'm just going to temporarily drop this back down to a minimal, sane amount of segments. So anyway, there we are. We can also use it for hard surface modeling. If we want, we can add quite a few segments to it and make sure our profile is 0.5. And let's just add some segments. And what we can do is we can go in here to shading and UVs with these edges selected and these faces not selected. I can just go to faces, smooth. And this will smooth out these kind of edge areas while leaving these faces here completely flat shaded. So if we then render with this, you get some nice clean looking results. And I can go in here and select my material, and you can see we get these nice flat surfaces along the sides, but we get these kind of round bevels. It can be really nice and clean and be good for a lot of hard surface modeling. Again, very fine bevels also work quite well with this. So we can just go in here, face is smooth, and render. There we are. There's our glorious little rounded cube. So anyway, so that's all fine and dandy, but there's another kind of lovely little bevel that we can add. So one of the things that we can do, if we want, is something called a vertex bevel. We can select a couple vertices. In this case, I'm going to be selecting some that are surrounded by, little vertices here. So I'm just going to select some vertices that I feel like adding a hole to. This is a technique I got from Jerry Perkins, who is an awesome robot modeler. You should check him out on Facebook. He's quite awesome. And, frankly, just a fun guy to hang out with. We can go in here, we can bevel it with Control-Shift-B. So that's Control-Shift-B to add some cool loops and whatnot. Some cool vertex loops. And then what we can do is, if we've got the loop tools enabled, which you can do by going to User Preferences, under Add-ons, and searching for Loop. This is a lovely little add-on that I've recently started to play around with in depth. Loop Tools is actually quite awesome. Actually has things like, if you want to play with something really fun, you should actually go in and, let's see, where the hell is it? Tools, Loop Tools, G-Stretch is super amazing. Just go look up some of the cool Loop Tool stuff. Anyway, but for now, we're going to stick it to some pretty simple stuff. We're going to go to W, Loop Tools, Circle. And this will give us a lovely little circle. We can just hit F, and then we can just extrude this downward a bit if we want. We can also expand our selection a little bit. I'm just going to do the bear claw of Control-Shift-Alt right-clicking with an edge selected. This will basically do a face select, but it basically selects edges in the other direction than you would normally see. It goes along the edge, kind of perpendicular to it, rather than following the direction of the edge. It goes against it. So that can be kind of useful in some cases. So you can either bevel normally, like this. You can bevel if you want to feel really weird. If you want to see some really weird stuff, you can go for an inverted bevel on it, which creates this kind of weird indented shape. Or you can just simply do the edge support, which, of course, at a profile of 1, you can do right there. And subdivision surface. As you can see, it just creates these nice indented holes in our mesh. This can be used for a lot of really cool bolt sockets and stuff like that. And there's a lovely little bolt add-on you can enable as well that works quite well. So there, we've got a basic coverage of the bevel tool. But let's actually go in and let's model something with it, just to give ourselves a nice, little view of what our model, how we would model something with this. So I've obviously already done that over here to make some models, but I'm just going to dive in and talk about some of the techniques. I think since we've already done a pillar, we've already done even though you didn't see it, we did a railing, the same techniques could be applied to the floor, so let's actually do a floor tile. Because frankly, at this point, I might as well reuse these horribly just destroyed takes to actually make a lovely little environment. At the very least, I'll have something to throw in my portfolio. So I'm just going to select the cube, shrink it down, and let's add a little bit more of an interesting edge to this. So we could simply select the edges of this and bevel them normally, but that's boring. That's boring. Let's scale this up, and let's use that inverted profile for what it's really good for, which is adding some really crazy shapes. I'm also going to make this floor tile a bit thinner. And so we can select this. I'm actually going to inset this slightly for convenience purposes, so I can actually do like edge selects and stuff. Anyway, so I can go in and I can add like a little rounded edge bevel. But that looks fine and everything, but I want to make this look a little bit more interesting, so I'm actually going to add something called a shelf. A shelf is when you add a 90-degree curve. So in this case, I've added a little step, a little shelf in here. So if we go in here, and there's a cool feature of these low-profile bevels, which is that if you bevel a concave little bit of the mesh, you can actually get these kinds of little tubes added. It's like adding a little tube to your mesh. And if I select both of these and bevel them, if you do convex surfaces, they actually get this little groove in them. So you can see here. And then I'm just going to scale that up a little bit. I'm also going to make this slightly less detailed resolution-wise because it does not need to be that high poly count. You can also hold down left shift to be more precise. You can pull it and make it more overlapped. You know, you can actually overlap them one atop another. It's one of the few times where that's actually really effective. So I'm just going to stretch that upward. I also want to add like a little bit of space near the top, so let's just go in here, select the bottom face. Let's drag that down. So as you can see, we're already starting to get an interesting floor tile. I can just sort of add a... now if I want to do something a little bit more interesting, one thing I can do is if you've got a big flat surface like this, we can actually just hit Control B and add some edge loops for beveling. Beveling doesn't always have to be on an edge to actually add more detail. It can actually be something that you do to just add edge loops. For example, in this case, I'm going to add 3 edge loops. Now, there's a special reason why I'm adding 3 edge loops specifically. So I'm going to bevel this out, add 3 edge loops, hit Control, you can hit Control minus on your number pad to actually shrink your selection. You can also hit Control plus to grow it. That's kind of useful when you've got a selection that you just want to make slightly smaller. And I'm just going to drag this in a little bit so we can create a groove like this. So that looks kind of nice, but I don't know, it's not that interesting on the scale of things. If we then bevel it with our nice low profile bevel, we get this lovely little roundy edged thing. I love these kind of tricks. So you can see that adds like a little groove, little tube of wood around the edges. Look at that. That's kind of cool. So as you can see, this add a little bit of ornate wood detail. I can continue from here and go like, okay, well, I kind of want to add, I want to make this look not super hard edge, so I'm going to make that beveled once. That looks kind of nice. I can go in here and I can add like a sub bevel to this. And you can keep adding detail, though I'd recommend not going too overboard on it. I'm not actually going to add that sub bevel there. So you can see here I've created like a little floor tile. And I can just toss this in here. Now, this is all great and dandy, but I don't know, we kind of want to know, how did I, make these little details here? How are these kind of things made? Well, we might just need some details for this. Let's see. This thing looks really garish anyway, this kind of fancy as shit, over the top. So why don't we go in here and let's actually create something that has some extra detail to it. So let's go in here. I'm just going to create like a little array of tiles because, frankly, I think it would be cool. So there we are. 2 and there. So here I've made my little hallway or whatever the hell it is. So let's actually create some details that we can layer on here in between, or I don't know where we're actually going to find a way to jank these in there. Actually, I know where we're going to jank these in there. Let's just select this, hit Alt-D, drag this up, and let's just flip it, because this would also work as a ceiling tile, which is one of the few times where this would actually work. So, there, ceiling tile. We need to add some detail to the ceiling. So I'm going to go over here, make sure we've got the ceiling on another layer so I can actually play with it. So how do we add some detail to this? Because, I don't know, we kind of might need to do some detail. Well, we can use profile-based modeling. Now, what profile-based modeling is, this might give you a reminiscence of a property we talked not too long ago about. We've been talking about it the entire time, which is our profile on our bevel. Well, the profile refers to the side-along shape, the profile that you see. So when you see talking about a picture in profile, it's talking about, like, essentially in 2 dimensions, the outline, the profile of something. That's actually quite important when you're modeling because we can use it to actually model very ornate details very easily. So in this case, I'm just going to create a cube. I'm going to bevel some sides of it. And my goal here is to create a profile, a side-along view of some piece of detail. So this is a shape that I personally really like. I'm going to delete the end caps. We're going to make this just an edge loop at the end of this. This is going to end up being an edge loop. I'm going to add some subdivision surface because we're going to need it for the technique I'm about to apply. Now let's talk about edge creasing, adding some sharp edges. So one of the things we could do is just literally crease the edge. This doesn't work too well, it's a little bit tedious, and moreover, we're going to be deleting it down into an edge loop, so we're going to lose this information anyway. On the other hand, we could also use our little beveling support edges trick. We could use our beveling and support edges trick for 2 segments, and then a profile of 1, and then go in here, support the edges, and that looks quite nice. And because these are actual vertices, and they're not directly overlapping, we can actually go in, and you can see those vertices are still there, even in our 2-dimensional version. So when I extrude it out, you can see we still get a lovely little profile. So I'm gonna scroll over here, and bring in the ceiling, and now let's actually go to start creating our shapes. So I'm gonna scale this down. And I'm also going to, while we're at it, just move this up to the center. And I'm also going to mirror it. So here we've got some mirrored versions. I'm just going to bring this down, make it kind of fine grain. Make sure I'm viewing the right side. So kind of viewing everything upside down, so all my controls are inverted. But what we can do is we can either extrude normally, and sometimes you'll get these to be inverted. You just hit Control N to recalculate normals and make them point the right way again. So I could just manually start extruding these, and that would work, but it'd be really tedious, so I'm actually going to select these, delete them, and just Control Click, which will extrude to wherever you're clicking. And you can just create some really nice detail this way. So in this case, you can see I've created myself a lovely little shape. Come on. Fuck. Control N. There. I clicked the button. The greatest of achievements. The button has been clicked. Notify the mayor. I'm also going to Alt-D and rotate this by 90 degrees so that we have this also mirrored over the other direction. So this will not be real time because you actually need to toggle in and out of edit mode to do it. But as you can see, this helps with positioning. So here we've created it, but the problem is we've got this, we've kind of folded it around over on itself. It doesn't look too good. It kind of looks a little bit crappy, so let's make this look a little bit better. Let's select the ends that we have kind of left open here. I'm going to use Alt-O to activate connected proportional editing. If you're not familiar with that is, when you drag it, it'll actually, it's like normal proportional editing, but instead of doing it based on how close they are in the actual world, it does it based on how connected they are via the edges. So I can scale this down vertically, and I can kind of tuck it into itself, like this. And while that looks okay, it kind of looks a little bit shabby and meh, detail-wise. So I'm going to add one more element. I'm going to add a cylinder with 12 vertices. And I'm just going to bring this up into our lovely little detail layer here. So I'm going to go in here, kind of use it to plug up that hole and make it look a little bit more interesting. Now, as you can see, it's also not a super interesting looking little peg. So I'm actually going to go in here, And I'm just going to bevel it with our lovely little hard edges. Lovely little profile of one style edges. Just add some supporting edge loops to keep it from looking like a horrible blob of subdivision surface. So we can get kind of a nice little peg shape out of this. Now I'm just going to drag this down, slot it back in. And as you can see, we've got ourselves a lovely little piece of detail work. And this is kind of where we can start to have a lot more fun, because we've got our profile, right? We've got our profile, we've done the majority of the work already. So there, we've got ourselves a lovely little piece of detail. And I'm just going to steal the profile again. We've made all the pieces we need, so let's just steal the profile again. Let's just make a, I don't know, let's make a little C-shaped thing. So let's just rotate this around, and let's twist this around on itself. And then let's also go over here and twist this around on itself, and you can kind of keep building some cool parts out of this. You know, profile-based modeling is really fun in this regard, where you sort of just get to draw out with polygons whatever the hell you want. So I'm just going to select my two open edge loops, and we're going to again do that connected proportional editing thing. Tucking that in on itself. And then I'm just actually going to steal the pegs from the end of this. And I'm just going to grab them. Actually, I'm just going to grab one of them. Control L. Just go over here. Scale this down. And there we are. So here you can see we can now plug in the little pegs. And we can continue to create details like this as we go to just make the scene seem a lot more interesting. So here I can go in and select our little C-shaped piece that we just made. I'm also going to stop using perspective occlusion and whatnot because it's a pain in the ass. I'm going to just bring this down in here. We're going to use some nice radial symmetry. It's kind of irritating having to jump in and out of edit mode to make it work, but whatever, we'll do it. So here you can see we can tuck it in. There we are. I'm kind of nudging ever so slightly. It's been my first time actually using this technique in this extreme of circumstance. So let's just go in here. Let's go over here and let's fill in this gap here with this. So there's some detail for us. Then I'm going to go and select this lump of detail, whip it around here. And there. So I've created some nice ceiling details. And honestly, I'm going to twist this up and rotate this around to something slightly more interesting, because that does not look good. Looks like a weird heart shape, and it's just meh. Boring. Now this is more like it. So there we are. Obnoxious ceiling details. There, we've created some cool ceiling details. That was somewhat long-winded. Anyway, or not even long-winded, I wasn't even talking that much. Anyway, but you can kind of see the workflow there. I know it was kind of quiet for most of it, but hopefully that gave you enough of the workflow to get you started. But that's profile-based modeling to a certain degree. So let's just assign that there. just going to slap a metal material on it while I'm here, because I know I'm going to need to do that later. And while we're here, I'm also going to slap a dark material on here. And let's go in and just array by 2 meters. And we'll do it 3 times. Delete. Alt D. 180. Alt R. Or Z. 90 degrees. Control A. Rotation. Wait, no, that won't actually work. Shit. So, this is not actually going to work. So we actually need to Alt D to duplicate this, rotate this by 90 degrees, add an array modifier that offsets it by 2, go 3 times. Then we need to also go add a modifier. That's kind of an interesting thing. I thought, I wasn't even thinking about this as an issue before. So, here we are. So we'll drop this down, and there we are. Okay. I've learned a thing. There. I've learned a thing. Let's just bring in all our different pieces of the environment, and there we are. We've learned to make some detail. We've learned to use the bevel tool to all of its amazing power in environments. And, yeah. Look at that. It's garish as fuck. God, I love it. Looks so goddamn ugly. But it would pass for ornate detail. It's like, looks like a child made it. It's like some goth princess house. Fucking ridiculous. Goth Barbie. You know, I'm just gonna make a picture with this, and I'm just gonna call it Goth Barbie's house. That's what this is gonna be. This is gonna be Goth Barbie's house. There. So, let's go in here, and, yeah. Hopefully this has taught you some things. Sorry if it's such a quiet, rambly video. I had good takes before, then they exploded. They exploded, and I had horrible recording problems. Anyway, yeah. Here's Goth Barbie's house. We have created it. We have created this monstrosity. Well, hopefully you've learned some things about how the kind of cool stuff you can do with the bevel tool, and there's tons of stuff that I haven't talked about as well. And, yeah, just go make awesome stuff, because bevel tool is super powerful. And, at some point I need to cover the inset tool, because that's another one that I've found myself using so often since they made it not suck. Because it used to suck way back in the day. It used to be a really boring, terrible tool, and now it's amazing. Now it's really, really amazing. And, yeah. I find myself using it more and more and more as time goes forward. It's such a cool tool. So, yeah. Hopefully this has given you some cool ideas for making stuff. Obviously, this is garishly overdone, but, yeah. We can make this look better if we, just spent a little bit more time on it. This looks... Yeah, this is Goth Barbie's house. You know what? Fuck it. I'm throwing this in my portfolio. This is like going in my portfolio because honestly, I think it would be hilarious. And I think it gives people an impression of the level of class I've got, which is to say not much. Anyway, peace out. Cthulhu Ftachen. Goodbye.